In this video for Positive Maths, we're going to learn about income tax and calculating net pay. So we can use this table to help us to identify the information we're given and then to help us to find any missing information before we calculate the net income. This will help us to structure our answer. So let's take an example. If Robert's annual salary amounts to €35,750. His tax credit is €8,260 and his cut-off is €29,500. If he pays tax at a standard rate of 20% and a higher rate of 41%, calculate his annual net income. So, the steps that we should follow. Number 1, we should fill in the information we're given. Number 2, we need to identify what we need to find, so the missing parts. And then number 3, work from the top down to find the net income. So just to note, we may need to work from the bottom up if we're asked to look for the gross income, or take different steps if we're finding any other piece of information. So we'll see examples of this later on. So let's work through this example. So the annual salary amounts to $35,750. His tax credit is $2,260. And his cut-off is $29,500. He pays tax at a standard rate of 20% and a higher rate of 41%. So we need to calculate his annual net income. So as we can see, we have a lot of blanks in between our gross income and our net income. So there's a lot of other parts that we need to calculate first. Okay, so the first thing we're going to calculate is the amount over the cutoff. So we have 35750 minus 29500. And we get 6,250. Now we need to calculate the tax they will pay. So it's going to be 20% of 29,500. So we can multiply that by 0.20. And 41% of 6,250. So multiply that by 0.41. So 20% is going to be 5,900. And 41% of 6,250 is going to be 2,562.50. So we'll fill those into our table. So the total tax is going to be the sum of these two figures, which will give us 8,462.50. Now we subtract our tax credit from our total tax. And we get €6,202.50. Now that we have found that, we want to remember that our gross income minus our tax payable, or our net tax, is going to give us our net income. So we have 35750 minus 6,202.50. And we're going to get 29,547.50. So net income, so not forgetting our units, 29,547.50. So really, to find the net income, we need our gross income minus our tax payable, and everything in between. They are the steps we've taken to calculate this tax payable. Let's look at another example. Grace works in a bookshop and earns $12.50 per hour for a 40-hour week. As I'm going through, I'm going to underline the key bits of information. Her cut-off is €400 and her tax credit is €50. The standard rate of tax is 20% and the higher rate is 41%. If Grace works overtime, she will earn time and a half. In a particular week, Grace works 45 hours. So we need to calculate, first of all, her gross wage for the week. Second of all, the amount of tax she will pay. And then third, we need to calculate her take-home pay. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to discuss here is the time and a half. Okay, so this is an extra half of her hourly rate added on. Okay, so what she gets for time and a half. So to calculate this, we're going to multiply 12.5 by 1.5. And this is going to give us 18.75. So that's what she gets for her overtime hours. So now let's calculate her total gross wage for the week. So she works 45 hours. This is going to be divided into 40 of her normal hours. So 40 hours at $12.50 per hour. And then 5 hours at $18.75 per hour. Okay, so it's going to be $12.50 multiplied by 40 plus $18.75 multiplied by 5. So 12.50 by 40 is going to give us 500. For her overtime, she will get 93.75. So in total, she's going to get 593.75. And that's euro. So even though we don't have the table in this question, we're going to still keep it structured in the same way. Okay, so now we've identified that her gross income, $593.75. The next thing we have to do is calculate the amount of tax she will pay. So, like before, we want to identify our cutoff. So the cutoff is equal to €400. So now we want the amount over that. So we have 593.75 minus our 400 is going to give us 193.75. So the standard rate is 20%. The higher rate is 41%. So we're going to put the tax at 20% is going to be equal to 400 multiplied by 0.2 to find 20. Which will give us €80. Then we're going to calculate the tax at 41%. So this is going to be the amount above 400, which is 193.75, multiplied by 0.41. So that's going to give us 79.44. Okay, so the total tax then is going to be equal to 80 plus 79.44, which is going to give us 159.44. Now we want to identify and subtract our tax credit. So it's going to be 159.44 minus her tax credit, which is €50. So the total tax she will pay is going to be equal to €109.44. So for the final part of this question, we need to calculate her take-home pay. which is also her net income. So the net income is equal to the gross income minus the tax payable. So that's going to be 593.75 minus 109.44. So her net income is going to be 484.31. For more information, visit www.PositiveMaths.ie, email us at info@PositiveMaths.ie, and find us on Facebook and Twitter.